Hi, everybody. It is so nice to be here with all of you LinkedIn friends. I am Dorie Clark, and I am here with my good friend, Keith Ferrazzi. It is a treat to get to see Keith. We last saw each other in person in San Diego in January, just before the world shut down and we weren't allowed to travel anymore. But you probably know Keith from his previous #1 New York Times bestselling books, Never Eat Alone and Who's Got Your Back. And he is out with a newly released book called Leading Without Authority. So it's wonderful to have you here, Keith.
Thank you. And by the way, you know our history, but maybe your audience doesn't. I have been so proud of you, watching you grow as a thought leader, as a business person. Maybe you can even tell the story, but I just remember that very first lunch we had in Boston, and how touched, moved, and inspired I was by your tenacity, your vision for what you wanted to achieve. So it's been a great relationship, and I'm blessed for it.
Oh, thank you so much, Keith. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was that was wonderful. We met up in Boston. We were both at our mutual friend Tony Chan's On Cue event that he hosts every year, and it was actually in the context of another book. I was interviewing you for my Forbes column, and I believe it was the re-release of Never Eat Alone. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I'd love to greet all of the folks who are here. Please go ahead and type into the chat box where you're from. We'd love to say hi. I see Gretel from Spain. We have Marcy from Florida. We've got, of course, our friend Carlos from Colombia. That's wonderful. But yeah, please feel free to type in and say where you are. We would love also, we're going to be taking your questions for Keith. So please type them into the chat box as well. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. But Keith, I wanted to get started. So your previous books have been, more or less in the sphere of relationships, networks. This is a bit of a departure, and I know that it's something that you've been working on for a long time. How did leading without authority become a topic that was of interest to you? Why did that draw you in?
Yeah. Well, look, the arc of my work probably starts with my mission. And it started with an 8-year-old kid sitting at his dad's table in Pittsburgh. Dad was unemployed. And I had heard my father consistently talk about how the ideas that he had in the workplace, my dad was a steel worker, were rebuffed. And really, he would bemoan the fact that he saw opportunities for the growth of the business. But the reality was his manager didn't want to hear it. In fact, his manager sometimes would say, "Pete, slow down, you're throwing off the piece rate," which means, my dad was, by working harder than the average, was making the manager look bad because other people weren't setting up to that par. So what I remembered was that was poor management. That was poor leadership. And I blamed the companies for our unemployment, for our loss, for our economic disparity. And I said, I was going to grow up and I was going to do something about that. I thought I was going to be in politics. But that ended up, for lots of reasons, didn't go that same way.
You and me both, brother.
Exactly. Well, hey, there's still that option. But for both of us, I think both of us have a passion for transforming human lives through the workplace. And that's what I do. I transform human lives through the workplace today. Today, I wake up, we're coaching transformation at General Motors, at Delta Airlines, at Verizon. And, it's all come beautifully full circle. Now, interestingly, this is my first leadership book, but I've been working in the genre of leadership in teams because our focus is on high-performing teams. It always has been. I've always believed, and this is what I learned from my dad, I've always believed that inside of our organization is unmet and unreleased pent-up value creation. And I believe that there's two places where that value creation exists. One of the places it exists is at the executive team level, which is where I spend most of my time. At the executive team, I coach teams to transform. And I feel that if you could shift a team to become what in the book I call co-elevating. So the title is Leading Without Authority, How the New Power of Co-Elevation Can Break Down Silos, Transform Teams, and Reinvent Collaboration. And it's based on this that we have done extraordinary work, put 20% on a company's stock price, created billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars of new revenue. And the second place is down in the organization to unleash individuals who have a role to do, to work with their peer groups to open value, like as if my father had done that with his peers. Well, I learned that at a company called ICI when I was right out of Yale. I went to work for a British chemical company, and they were starting this idea of process improvement teams, the stuff that my dad's foreman didn't want to hear, but we were unleashing that. So I was leading process improvement teams, and I saw value creation there. Now, at the core of any team to be effective with each other is relationship. You know, there's got to be psychological safety for a team to challenge each other, for a team to innovate with each other, to take bold risks. Relationship is an underpinning of the success. Now, in another part of my life, I had a lot of early success, as you know, in work. I was the chief marketing officer at Deloitte and Starwood before I was in my early 30s. And when an article was written about me that ultimately became my first book, Never Eat Alone, it was about how did you get success? And I wrote 10 things down. They became the framework of the book. They were all relational. It was about my relationships with my CEO of Deloitte, about my relationship with Michael Milk, and my relationship with mentors of mine along the way. And so when I wrote my second book, Who's Got Your Back, and I started to realize my brand was about the relational and collaborative sciences. I was working to apply all of these principles in these large organizations, but I was writing for individual contributors. And I started to decide 10 years ago that I was going to write my first integrated book. But here's why it's not different, in that, as Adam Grant writes about leading without authority, he said, we've been talking for 5 years now about how business is done in networks, that the new org design of business doesn't have anything to do with an org chart. It has to do with how people work through networks. And he you know, I'm very grateful to Adam. He said, this is the very first book that gives you a roadmap for how to be a leader in networks. So it's really not that different. The principles have carried through all of my work. The mission has always been the same. This just happens to be the first time that I've taken and revealed my work from a corporate perspective on pages.
That's terrific, Keith. Thank you. And I just want to give a shout out for some of the great folks who are tuning in here. We have Linda from Nashville. We have Samrat from New York. We have Liz from Boston. Hey, Liz, I was just on her podcast. We have Bula from Fiji, Denise from Wisconsin, Ashley from LA. We have folks from Santa Barbara, Slovakia. We have Dawn from Mahomet, Illinois. This is fantastic. We have Alicia from DC. We have Eunice from Algeria. Garong from Sydney. I could go on. We are happy to have all of you guys here. And I'll just mention, if you are enjoying the chat with Keith, hit share in your LinkedIn button so that other people, so your friends can see this conversation as well. So Keith, I wanted to dig into a point that you had made, which I think is really crucial in your book. You talked about the concept of co-elevation. What do you mean by that? What does that look like, and how might a person do that?
Yep. So it really is the core methodology in the book. For you to be a successful leader today, when you don't necessarily have authority, and you might say, well, wait a second, I have lots of authority. You don't have enough. Nobody in whatever organization you're in has sufficient resources or authority to be truly transformative. Dorie, you know my friend Peter Diamandis. Peter has taught me, what does it really mean to be exponential? And exponential is big. It's not anywhere close to average or momentum. So for you to be exponential, for you to truly create exponential change, you're going to have to, I created a word for it, team out. You're going to have to team out in significant ways. You're going to have to look way beyond your control and engage people. So the first chapter in the book is, who's your team? There's a wonderful story I tell about a woman who was defining her team in one way, and she was frustrated and fatigued. And when she opened her aperture and realized her team was a much broader group of individuals, the people that were combating her, she ended up realizing they were on her team. And then she approached them, and through the next chapter, which is earning permission to lead. How do you open people up to earn permission to lead? Once you know that, then people who used to be, in your mind, barriers become teammates and co-creators. So the principle of the book actually was started with a very different idea. I almost started writing a third in my trilogy. You know, if Never Eat Alone is about your network and building that broad aperture of relationships, and Who's Got Your Back was about the tightest, most intimate, connected relationships. One of the thoughts I had, and I think it's true, and it actually became a chapter in this book. I originally thought I'm going to write a book about how within every relationship there is coaching. How do you coach your peers? Look, I mean, you know, Dorie, I don't know right now what your relationship status is, but when I was married, I realized I was a very poor coach of my spouse, right? As most of us recognize. And if I think about the two of us, you know, we have been each other's coaches. You know, I started out being a bit of a mentor to you, but you've become a mentor to me. And that co-coaching has been extraordinary for me, and I hope for you. And I believe that we needed a formula, because Dorie doesn't report to me. Traditional coaching is authoritative and vertical. The world of coaching today needs to be networked and horizontal. And that was the original ideation of the book. I wanted to write a book on how coaching is transforming and needs to transform. So that's where I started researching the book. And then I realized, no, it's not just about the coaching. I've got to start to recognize that coaching toward what? It's coaching toward transformation, toward exponentialism. And really what I was saying was, if you're a leader in an organization, you've got a bunch of people around you that you think need to change in order for your vision to realize. That's what this book begins to teach you to do. It teaches you, how do you enlist people who don't have an authority relationship with you, and certainly not sublimated to you in any way? How do they become your co-elevating team? So the principle is that you as a leader need to infuse in the people who are working on the project a commitment. And we get very formal in the book on how you formalize that commitment with a group to go higher together, right? It's a commitment to a mission, but it's a commitment to each other. And the book teaches you how to navigate that and bring that in abundance in your life, so that in anything you want to achieve. I'm coaching many people right now who want to make a big difference in what's going on in society with systemic racism, and who were angry and wanted to activate in the world around this. I'm offering to coach them on how they lead movements, which are really leading without authority. How do they lead their movements? How do they invite co-creators? How do they move the needle on these socially impactful ideas, right? And how do they go higher together? How do they co-elevate with their movement? So it can be applied in marriages. It can be applied to your work, of course, is how it was written originally. And it can be applied even to social change in the world.
I think that's really powerful, Keith. And so in a moment, I want to turn to audience questions. So guys, please feel free to type in your questions into the chat box. We want to get your questions in for Keith. But first, Keith, I just want to follow up on the strand of what you were talking about. If you were advising someone, let's say they're an employee in the company, they're lower level, mid-level, they don't necessarily have a lot of formal authority yet, and there's something they really care about. Maybe it's a project they want to advance. Maybe it is a social cause where they feel like the company isn't necessarily paying as much attention to issues around the Me Too movement or about Black Lives Matter or something that they care about. And they feel like, I just don't know that people are listening or that I have a lot of authority to make change. What would be the first thing or the first few things that you would suggest for that person to actually get something moving?
Yeah. So in all change that you're trying to create, you need to find your first co-creator, right? Because your vision today is not the final vision. It's not even the intermediate vision. It's only the starting vision. And you need to move from where you are today to a clearer, more definitive vision and plan. And that's not going to be happening with yourself. It's going to be happening with your co-creators. So the first question is, as it is in the first chapter, is who's your team? Who's your team? And that team doesn't have to start with anybody other than one individual, one other co-creator. And there's a lot of strategy in thinking about that. I have led movements inside of companies like General Motors, and you don't start with the most difficult jackass, right? You start with the individuals that you can lean into and you feel excited and co-creative, because the most important thing, there's role models and there's naysayers. And the naysayers will prevent you from being successful. So battling your time to just prevent naysayers when you haven't even gotten any traction, your ability to make a change in the world and in an organization is your ability to get traction. And then people are attracted to traction. Right? That's a good tweet. People are attracted to traction. And so once you get traction with one individual around a vision that you two have co-created, the other question is, what does it mean to be a part of a team? The first person to join your team, they're joining their team. That's a powerful shift in traditional leadership. Traditional leadership, people are joining your team, but they're not. They're joining their team. And if you can shift the emotion, and there's all of the details, there's a chapter called Serve, Share, and Care. How do you open porosity? Porousness is the absorptiveness of a human. How do you open the absorptiveness of a human to your vision? Part of that is through co-creation, right? Part of that is through celebration. Part of that is through a shared commitment to go higher together, a sense of bonding and development, right? So there's all of these elements. And as a great artful leaders, I think have traditionally known some of this, but we're in a very new leadership world. I think the world of leadership is so radically changed that we needed a manual for how to lead in this convoluted networked world. So the first step is develop your team and co-create.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keith. I think that's really useful. And thank you so much. I see a stream of questions coming in, guys. These are fantastic. If you would like to make sure that you are receiving up-to-date information and don't miss any LinkedIn Lives that I'm doing, please subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. The LinkedIn newsletter, you can go to open a new window in your browser and go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. You can subscribe to the newsletter. Just click on the subscribe button underneath the banner and you can get it that way. So Keith,
and by the way, I think probably my head of social media and my chief marketing officer are both in the chat box saying, don't forget to mention KeithFerrazzi.com. So same thing, KeithFerrazzi.com gives you the opportunity to follow us and subscribe to our newsletters and also on all the work we're producing.
Yes, please do that, because Keith's work is amazing. And his new book, of course, is Leading Without Authority. It is available for sale now. And so a great question came in, Keith, from my friend in London, David Lansfield. David wants to know, how do you elevate those around you when the pressures, for example, from investors or customers, are just so intense and the expectation for immediate results are so high? I'm sure a lot of folks are feeling that these days.
Well, and I don't think you have a choice. So the cycle time to make change occur and get outcomes is what I'm measuring. So when I work at a company like, a large automotive company, we could bake a program that is intended to train every member of the field sales organization, right? And then we can ship it by running everybody through it. And we could check a box and say that we're done in 6 months. But the actual change that's occurred in sales might be fractions of the need to actually make a difference. On the other hand, by co-creating a more robust solution, there's a great example of an insurance company in the book that it was doing just that. Urgent situation, baked in answer, shipped it like they normally do, fell flat. Excuse me. When we got involved, when we introduced this methodology, the shift was, no, we are going to work with the field sales organization and co-create a solution that they not only own. It's not about buy-in and ownership. It's about, nobody is better than my dad at telling you how to do his job at the front line. Nobody's better than the sales organization to tell you how to adopt the new digital tools that you're wanting them to adopt. And yet we do these placation bullshit things like have a focus group where a bunch of sales reps come in and complain about something for a little bit of time. They're not co-creating. You're doing this dip in, buy-in process where you've created something, you're trying to sell it to somebody who wants to be sold to. There's a whole chapter around how you run co-creation at scale. And the reality is that we were able sequentially, time and time again in organizations, using this principle of co-creation, co-elevation, we were able to get to outcomes, real outcomes that were measurable. It might have taken 9 months, but it happened, versus the traditional training and development approach, which takes 3 to 6 months, but doesn't happen. So you have a choice as a leader. You either do it right and it's sustainable and it's real outcomes, or you push another damn program through the marketplace or through the organization. And it's relatively, I wouldn't say it's useless, but it's relatively useless relative to sustainable change. So look, I'm not saying you have to slow down to speed up, but what I'm saying is, over 20 years of bringing large scale sustainable change to companies, you cannot use a methodology like that traditional methodology. It's just not going to get you your outcomes.
Yeah, that's
Part of it is
interesting.
investing at the top. Invest at the top of that executive team. That executive team really needs to shift mindset of what it means to be a team. Right now, most of your executive team members are showing up with their work that they've done, bolting it into each other's work. They're not co-creating breakthrough solutions together. It's a big shift. The time's not even curated. The time's curated for report outs, not for collaborative problem solving.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, even going back to the beginning, I see a question has come in from Liz. She wants to know, just starting out, Keith, how do you go about finding your co-creator? What does that look like? How do you find a good, likely person?
Yeah, so Dorie, you've known me for a while, so I have these metricable systems. You take your relationship action plan, the people that you think you might co-create with, put an RQ score together. An RQ is what is the relationship quality you have with these individuals. So if you think there's 25 people you might co-create with, some of them are going to be already fives, which is great. They're under the tent with you. They're evangelists. They're supportive of you even when you're not around. Some of them are negative ones. I talked about the resistors. Some are, some are 0 to 2, and 0 to 2, you don't know them that well. And I love threes, because threes are acquaintances. They haven't really been activated as your co-creators. You may work with them, you may periodically collaborate with them, but you're not under the tent with them. You can get a lot of, but yet they're easy to start with because there's reasonable relationship. I like to go with threes, 3-level relationships. The other thing is you just start letting people know. It's like when I started moving and creating info products, right? You were one of the first people I called. I was like, Dorie, I want to create a course on this form of leadership, which we did. By the way, this course, Leading Without Authority, I created a 5-module course around this, 5 or 6 module course around this, and it's free. It's free at keithferrazzi.com. So I wanted people to be able to have a video course that helped you execute the book. And if you go, and you can get that right away at keithferrazzi.com. But I wanted to create a course to help leaders lead this way. And so my team members, I called you, I called Peter Diamandis, I called Jim Quick, I called the crew. And I am so excited. I am so excited that these individuals really, they really showed up in such moving and intimate ways. So look, you go with your level 3 relationships. Maybe Dorie, I'd say you and I are 4s and 5s. But you go with your level 3 relationships because that will give you the biggest change in what you're currently getting from that relationship.
That's great. Thank you very much, Keith. And we had a question come in from Abdallah, and he wants to know, can you talk a little bit about the future of high performing teams and leadership style, whether there's different styles of leaders or how that might factor in?
That's really smart. I have found, I think that a high performing team leader is its own style, in that I feel like an individual who's willing to let go and push the transformation down in to sort of the fabric of the team. What I want to occur is I want leadership to stop being the hub and spoke. I want to move from overloaded leaders to shared loaded leaders, where they've driven the leadership down, where they stop in the middle of the meeting, they pull out the chief marketing officer and they say to the CMO, okay, we're going to bulletproof what you're doing. We're going to be supportive of you. How does this team show up in support of you, right? That kind of peer-to-peer commitment is what leaders need to do. I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal. And in that piece, I really focused a lot about how managers and leaders need to start making managers and leaders out of their team. That's a style. Now, what does it matter if you're an introvert, if you're an ENTJ? I don't care. I really don't. You can lead from so many different styles, as you and I both know. But this is a very intentional shift. It's a very intentional shift.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keith. That's great. A quick technical question. Gretel wanted to know, she said that she just tried to order your book, but she wants to know when it's available in Europe. Apparently, it says it's available pre-order there. Is it soon that it's coming out?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I think, by the way, I do believe you can get it on Amazon shipped to Europe. I know a lot of my friends have been getting it shipped.
Yeah. Go to Amazon.com, Gretel. We'll hook you up.
Yeah. I don't know what that does to the shipping costs, and I apologize for that. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's great. Well, we have lots of eager readers, and certainly if you are in North America, get it now. And if you're in Europe, you can cadge it somehow. It is worth getting. I'll put it in the banner. I've now learned how to use banners, and so I'm really excited about it. Here we go. It's Leading Without Authority, Keith's new book. Keith, we have time for probably just one more question from the audience. Thank you so much, guys, for chiming in and for joining us today. This is a wonderful conversation. I will encourage you guys, please, open up a new window in your browser. Go on LinkedIn. You can follow Keith on LinkedIn. If you're not already following me on LinkedIn, please open a browser window. Follow me on LinkedIn. We'd love to continue the conversation. And so, Keith, the last question that I wanted to ask you that came through here, a LinkedIn user, I'm not sure who, because it just says LinkedIn user, so forgive me for not calling you out, my friend, but it says, Keith, how do you suggest overcoming leadership egos in authority that get in the way of high-performing teams? What would you suggest about the ego?
Well, unfortunately, that is a bigger resolution than a single question. By the way, I just noticed, for those of you in Europe, I think you can get the Audible book, and you can get the you can get the Audible, and you can get the Kindle. So there you go. But chapter 2, there's a chapter called "It's All on You," and what I talk about is Dorie knows I have a couple of foster children that are now my boys, and when they were younger, they were tough, still tough, but I never had the right to cross my arms and say, when you act like my son, I'll be your father. It wasn't an option. I made a commitment to myself, to God, to my family, that these are my boys and we will parent these boys through to their success. And it was tough. You have a fiduciary responsibility for the role you have. And I don't give a damn if your boss is a jackass or somebody you want to collaborate with you that's not playing the game. You want them to play the game. It's all on you. Sometimes you got to go 99.9% of the way for a while until you can earn the right to lead. And the book will give you the formula, but you've got to stop being so impatient, impetuous, and dilettantish. There's that chapter. I give you 6 deadly excuses for why we don't do this. And I hope you read them, and I hope they hit home. And by the way, they're also equally as effective of why we get in our own way with the relationships in our families too.
That's wonderful, Keith. I think you're exactly right. I mean, these techniques work in the workplace; they work in our lives. So it's really powerful. So again, the book is Leading Without Authority. You can get information about that, and you can get Keith's free course at keithferrazzi.com. If you enjoyed this, again, click the share button so your friends can see it on LinkedIn, and we can spread the word. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And Keith Ferrazzi, my good friend, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a wonderful treat to see you, my man.
Dorie, my dear friend, anytime. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.